So I lost functional communication at 18 months. It didn't start coming back until age 4. And as my parents report, it was, my speech was pretty unclear, but at least it was beginning to come back. I got reevaluated. Instead of being considered as psychotic and ready for an institution, I got upgraded to neurotic, so things are moving up in the world. I also discovered watch motors. My parents found me taking apart a watch with a sharp knife. I'd pop open the back, extract the motor, remove the gears, spin them around, and then put it all back together again. And the watch still worked, and there weren't any pieces left over. So amazing motor control. What kind of motor control do you need to take apart a watch? You got 2 types of motor control. There's fine and gross. The fine motor control, that's used to button your shirt, put on your glasses. You don't wind that watch over there, but you use the stem and you adjust it to do certain things. That's what tells you just how hard to hold a cup of coffee. Not so hard that you squish it and get it all over yourself, but hard enough so you don't drop it. And what do you know? It ends up at your mouth. And you don't pour it into your eye. We take all that for granted. That is fine motor control. I had plenty of it, a lot of it. There's that spiky skill set. A lot of fine motor control. And the other motor control is gross. And that's standing up, sitting down, opening doors, walking, carrying objects. So my gross motor control is pretty good. Fine motor control is great. But what about when it came to penmanship? Like many of us autistic people, I was a penmanship disaster area. One of the worst things I could experience in school would be to walk into a room with a paragraph on the board, especially in elementary school. So what does that suggest is going to happen? I heard somebody say, right, yeah, you're going to have to copy it down. And it would take me all period to get through a few words, and everybody else had gone to recess. So I was just a slow writer. Now we know more about people who have challenges with the difficulty. Those of us who have difficulty with the physical act of writing, and we have accommodations for that. But back then they didn't. So the question is, how could I have the fine motor control to take apart a watch, a superabundance of fine motor control to take apart a watch and put it back together again without any pieces left over and it's still working? But that was a disaster of penmanship. They're both fine motor control activities. And there's a lot of ideas about it. Interest? More interested in watches? Well, we tend to be interested in the things that we can do. So have much more success in that. But it goes deeper than that. Maybe it has to do with structure. Watches are very structured. Mechanical devices are very structured. They have to be. We need structure to be successful. Not all of us autistic people, but I know many autistic people who are really good at taking things apart and getting them back together again. Well, I would refer you to your favorite occupational therapist for some interesting neurological explanations as to why that's the case. Why do 2 things that seem so close together but just don't work? What this is an example of, it's another example of that widely varying skill set that we have and the sharp lines of demarcation between the abilities that autism gives us, and we have to be realistic, the disabilities that can come with being autistic. And when we talk about disabilities, we also have to question is how much of it really has to do with the individual and how much of it has to do with society and the way that the environment is built. I know many autistic people who are disabled by walking into a room lit with fluorescent lights because they cycle on and off 60 times a second. Most people don't notice it. For many autistic people, it's like looking into, it's like a strobe light. Now, strobe lights are fun on Halloween, they're fun at parties. Are you going to last all day in a room with a strobe light? Well, what if we replace the strobe lights with a different type of lighting? That disability disappears. So how much of it is the way society is built up, and how much of it is really in the person? And so that's the question. That's an important question that needs to be examined. So speaking of which, many of you may think that this has a fashion statement. And in many ways it is. It's always good to support my university, the Delphi University, when I travel around the world talking about autism. Next week I'll be in Australia giving some workshops on autism at a big conference. And then from there, I might as well drop by India because it's sort of on the way home. And I'll do some more conferences out there. Oh, so this hat. See those lights in the ceiling? Recessed lighting fixtures. For me, and many other autistic people, it's a visual sensory violation. For me, being under one of these lights is probably like looking into a spotlight for most other people. This is a great accommodation. And that's what it is. And that also gets into advocacy as well. And again, where is the disabling situation coming from? A supervisor showing me my new office. It's an open office. It's lit with these types of lights. I know enough about what it means to me to be autistic, and in this case, knowing that recessed lighting fixtures and I just do not get along. So that's number one. I've noticed the challenge in the environment. Well, number two, I got to advocate. So I turn to my supervisor and say, well, I noticed that nobody in the office here is wearing a hat except for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll pretend they're not wearing hats. Nobody's wearing a hat, but I wonder if it's okay if I wear a hat while I work here. That's it. One sentence, 1 or 2 sentences. Easy for the supervisor to understand, easy to provide support. So that was the second step. The third step is the disclosure piece. Why am I asking for greater understanding or an accommodation? And I would say to the supervisor, these lights are really bright, they give me a headache. I must have sensitive eyes. And I'll be much more productive for your office if I can wear this hat while I work. And just leave it at that. And what that's known as is a partial disclosure, which is a whole other area that merits discussion in exploring disclosure. When do you tell a person that you're autistic or neurodivergent? And why would you anyways? When is it appropriate to advocate? And how do you do it? So that's a whole topic that is important to give more time to. So maybe we'll catch that when I come back next year. So my parents turned away from the closed doors of deficit, disorder, and disability and looked at the open doors of ability and soon provided all kinds of other devices to take apart and put together. So they were promoting my interests. And it's when you notice and promote these interests, no matter how young that person is, they can start leading that person towards possible hobbies or areas of work, employment, careers later on in life. And I say possible because an interest doesn't always lead to employment. Now at that time it looked like that I might have been a good watchmaker. I'd need a lot of support and communication and everything else related to living as an adult. Had my trajectory gone in a different way, maybe I'd be fixing watches. But we never know where things are going to go. However, it is important to note those interests and work with them as launch pads for areas of further study and leading fulfilling and productive lives. Well, when my speech started to return, it wasn't clear. My pronunciation wasn't good. And this experience is dedicated to the person who has difficulty with phonemes. Phonemes, which are little bits of sound. It's the smallest unit of sound that we have in the English language. English has 44 of these phonemes. We only have 26 letters in the alphabet, but there are many letters that do double duty or triple duty. And we only need to think of the vowels. In each vowel, A has a number of sounds, E as well, and so on. But if you have difficulty in remembering what these sounds are, then it's going to cause a lot of challenges in reading. Reading aloud, to be specific. So how many of you know someone who had challenges when they were in school and the teacher would ask them to read aloud? And it just didn't quite seem to come out right. So what is that person experiencing? Well, let's take a look. Now, here is an easy passage. It's not difficult. And who would like to at least start reading this aloud? I won't call anybody, but if we have any volunteers. So you got to remember what sounds these letters map to. And if you can decode that, then it's easy to read. So who wants to give it a shot? You get extra credit. Any takers? Anybody ready to take a quiz on this? It's easy. Yeah, give it a shot. So far, so good. Keep it going. Now I'm going to be the misunderstanding teacher. No, we're waiting. Come on. Tap your foot, snap your fingers. That really helps students who are having a hard time figuring it out. Let's have a round of applause for your hard work. You get an A for effort, and you get a high A- for pronouncing most of the words correctly. And while the person who has difficulty with phonemes sees this, the teacher and everybody else sees that. See, it's not that hard to read. And people are wondering, why aren't you able to read that? And so this gives you the experience of what it can be for someone who has difficulty reading out loud due to a difficulty with mapping phonemes. So that gives you another sense of what it's like. Another area that's challenging for us autistic people is foreground and background. So what are important sounds, stimuli in the environment? What is not so important and can be ignored? So we can think of this very room. You're focusing on me, you're focusing on what's up here. What other sounds are there around us? The lights. Say that again? Oh, somebody cracked their knuckles. Yeah. There's ventilation fans going. Say again?
Some people are a little louder breathing than others.
Yeah, some people breathe a little more loudly than others. Yeah, exactly right. And us autistic people often pick up on these things. There are many autistic people, for example, who can hear electricity running through the walls of a room, like a cat. Imagine how distracting that would be. So most of you weren't aware of any of these sounds until you pointed them out. And now you can hear them because now you're thinking about them, but they'll rapidly go into the background. So for many of us, all these sounds come in full strength. They come in full strength. Which one do we focus on? And it can be hard. It's a little bit like you're home at night, you settle down to watch a movie on Netflix or some channel on cable TV. And you watch it. It's one channel. For the autistic person, it might be like watching all the channels at the same time. Or it might be putting up a couple of dozen little square YouTube windows on your computer and then playing them all at once, all different things. And that's what it can be like. And I know in school, one of the ways that I was challenged by this was taking notes. How many of you find taking notes challenging? Notes in class. Yeah. What's important? Combined with, if you're challenged with the physical act of writing. So before I knew this about myself, I'd always look around. Oh, she's taking notes, it must be important, so I better take notes too. And that's how I knew to take notes. It didn't really work very well. But taking notes is a very complicated task. And one of those tasks is what's important to write down and what isn't important to write down. And that's the foreground and background. Sometimes when I'm back at Adelphi University, when I'm teaching about sensory challenges, I'll get into the classroom early. I'll turn the audio sound all the way up to 10. I don't play anything. I just turn it all the way up. And when you turn audio equipment up to maximum volume, what do you get? It didn't get that bad, but yeah, you could. And there wasn't a microphone, so there was no feedback. But you get a lot of buzzing and hissing, and it's kind of annoying, but most people are good enough to push it into the background. And then I saunter in, I teach my class, I get going maybe for 5 minutes, only 5 minutes, then I walk over and turn it down. Everybody sighs with relief. Doesn't that feel better? So it takes energy to push things into the background, especially if, for us autistic people, it can be a greater challenge. All right, so let's take a look at math. How many people here are good at math? I'm not going to ask anybody to do any math, but how many of you feel pretty good at mathematics? How many of you wish you were better at mathematics? I bet we probably have some people who are reasonably good at math. But anyways, those of you who wish you were better at mathematics, and if we look at a person's strengths and a person's challenges, the strengths are up here and the challenges are over here. Can make kind of a wavy thing here. Math is someone who's good at math, you got math up here. Someone who has challenges in reading is down here, and so on. So it's a graph about that wide. What about the autistic person who has challenges in math? The dips are not going to be over here. They're going to go through the basement. And so how do we know if someone has say a math disability? So for those of you who wish you were better at math, is math good enough for you to get you through life? Got you through school, gets you through college. It's good enough. And not for my friend and colleague who I mentioned, who's now a senior research scientist. But other than her, your math is good enough, so your math's down here. But for someone with a widely varying skill set, the math is going to go through the basement. And it just won't be functional. Or it might be something else, whatever that challenging area is. So let's take a look at the mathematics. And I've got this nice addition table. And if you were students, I'd have you take these, answer these questions, just add them up, and then I grade them. But since you've all graduated, your students took these, answered these questions, and now you need to proof them. You need to correct them. So is number 1 correct? What about number 2? What about number 3? 3 is correct. All right, let's move on. What about number 4? Maybe. Is that right?
No.
Actually, it's right. What about 5? So now you're asking, oh, what am I talking about? It doesn't make sense. And that's for someone who has really significant challenges in math, and now it's about to make sense. Math in base 6. And all that means is that you go from 1 to 5, you never quite get to 10. Because by the time you get to that, whatever that base number is, you recycle them. So we do math in base 10 most of the time, probably because we have 10 fingers. So we got 0 through 9, but when we get to 10, it's not a new symbol. We just recycle a 1 and a 0. But this is base 6. So you never see a 6 here. And once you realize that it's in base 6, then it makes a lot more sense. And when we think about mathematics, and sometimes I'll see autistic people and others, and how they're different in thinking about formulas. This one might be familiar to you. It's the Pythagorean theorem. Others of you might be more familiar with that. You might remember it from a middle school or high school math book. And for some people who are visually based, geometry is much easier. But so often algebra is required first, which might be a mystery because geometry was around before algebra was. All right, let's do one more. This is the Stroop test. And it has to do with discrimination of input. So we're going to start. This is the practice session. And with this one, name the color, but not the word. So what we'll do is we'll name the colors going down. So we've got red, pink, green, gray, yellow. And then we'll get to the next column, and we'll get to the next column. So let's do it all together. You're now my choir. 1, 2, ready, go. Red, pink, green,
Yellow, black, purple, orange.
All right, everybody gets an A. All right. Now, let us suppose that we change the stimuli and we do the same thing. And again, you're saying the color of the word. Not the word, but the color. So, ready, set, go. Blue. It gets hard, doesn't it? Yeah. And even if you got them all right, how much cognitive energy did it take to do that? And just like in the back, you were reading that text, that scientific passage with the phonemes. You got it just about all right. But how much work did that take? And what would it be like to have to go through an entire day? It might be school, it might be work, it might be involvement in the community, having to read like that. How many of you know autistic people who are exhausted just by life and all of the stimuli? And you raised your hand, so you know someone.
I had a daycare and I had 2 little boys who were autistic.
Mm-hmm. And so they had plenty of challenges. And if we can understand what those challenges are, then we can work towards providing accommodations, helping that person cope with the challenges, or perhaps even deciding this challenge really isn't worth dealing with, and we're going to do something else. So let's take an example. Back to penmanship. There are some autistic people where writing is so challenging that there comes a point where we flip over from physical therapy, occupational therapy, getting that person to write better, towards another way of communication. And it might be typing, it might be pointing at pictures. And likewise with speech. There are many non-speaking autistic people, often referred to as nonverbal, but that's not quite the right way to think about it. And the reason why is because nonverbal suggests that the person does not understand language. How many of you know autistic people who don't speak, but somehow they communicate? And you know what they mean. So they're not nonverbal, they're non-speaking. And I know many non-speaking autistic people who were given up as being too something or other, low functioning, too whatever, too severe, whatever terminology, not worth thinking about. But either by mistake or by design, they're provided an assistive communication device. It might be pointing at pictures on a tablet. It might be pecking at a keyboard. And we find that these individuals have the same range of intelligence as the speaking population. And I have a number of non-speaking autistic friends who I may spend hours texting with. And the only reason I know they don't speak is because they told me, or I read it somewhere, or someone told me. I have a friend and colleague, his name is Paul Kotler. He's non-speaking. When I see him, he's happy to see me. He'll say my name. It's not very clear, but I recognize it. And that's all I'm going to get. Because speaking, he's just not neurologically set up to speak. Put him on a keyboard, and he says these amazing, profound things. He's finished his bachelor's degree, and he's thinking about getting a master's. He has the cognitive ability to do it. He doesn't have the speaking ability to do it, but he has the cognitive ability. So let's find another way in which to allow him to promote his strengths, allow him to demonstrate that he understands and has mastered materials. So what we've done today is I've taken you through a few experiences which I hope will help you become familiar with and understand what it can be like to be on this side of autism, on this side of neurodivergency. And again, for all of these challenges that we see, which cause disability, we always have to ask, is that person really unable to do what we want them to do? Or is the environment, has society set things up in a way that they're disabled from doing what they want to do? And if we provide an accommodation, maybe even as simple as a hat, maybe a different way of communicating, then that person can be as successful as everybody else. And I want to thank everybody who has come tonight, and I want to thank all of you for your efforts in striving to understand more about neurodiversity, more about autism, and whatever you do, those of you who are supporting autistic people and those who are neurodivergent, I thank you for that as well.